What do you get when you combine an F-15 Strike Eagle with that of a vertical launching rocket ship? You get the model created by Estes rockets called the Screaming Eagle. And we're going to build that in today's video, so sit back, enjoy the ride, and let's get building. Hey everybody, this is Kevin, and welcome back to another build video in our build series. This video we're going to be highlighting the Estes rockets Screaming Eagle. This is a skill level 2 kit that is part number 2117, and this particular rocket made its debut in the Estes catalog of 2006 and ran through 2014, so that gives it a 9-year span from being available by Estes. Of course, there's countless out there available. My good buddy Michael from California gifted me this kit in hopes that I would build it and fly it on my channel. So a huge shout out to Michael. Thank you very much for this. I know it's been a long time coming. I actually opened this up many months ago, and with the move and everything, I finally got it unpacked from a cardboard box, and it's now on the bench, and we're going to build it, and I'm excited to build it. It's a typical I think it's a BT-50, and it flies on your A's, B's, and C's motor. But as you can see, and from the intro, it is modeled after an F-15, although they don't specifically say that in either the catalog or the any other sources I found. But if anyone knows anything about military aviation, that is an F-15 design. Obviously, a little modification to make it more flight worthy, but nonetheless, it's a cool looking rocket. We're going to build it per the face card. We're going to build it stock for the most part. Michael always teases me about how I modify things, but I won't modify it in any way or shape or form that will affect its aesthetic look. We're going to keep it looking original. What's on the inside, well, that's another story. So let's go ahead and get this opened up and do a quick inventory of everything. Again, that face card is just gorgeous. That's a beautiful looking rocket. It also comes with one of the little pocket cards that you can cut out and I guess add to a card collection if you're into trading cards. So we'll set that aside. Let's get everything out, and we'll again do a quick inventory. Set the bag aside. Okay, let's kind of go through things here. Here is our instruction book, and we're going to highlight the inventory list right now. So let's go ahead and get that up, and we'll go through it. Okay, first and foremost, we are looking for the white engine mount, which is right here, and there should be, oh, look what just came out. A little spacer was hiding in there. So we'll go ahead and check those two off the box right off the bat. Now there should be some centering rings. Here we go. A bag within a bag. Let's empty this bag out and see what all we got in here. Okay, here are our 3 centering rings. Well, I should say 2 are adapters and 1 is the actual engine block or thrust ring. So we'll set those 3 aside. Then we should have 2 wooden dowels, which we got right here. They look to be maybe 1/8 inch. Okay, then we got the main body tube, which is right here. Again, that's going to be a typical BT-50 size body tube. We've got this cool looking nose cone. Look at that. A little seam line running down the side, on both sides actually, so we'll get that sanded and buffed out before painting, but very cool. Little military aircraft design look to it. We should have a launch lug. There it is. Your typical, I believe that's about 1/8 inch launch lug. Okay, we've got the engine hook. We've got a bunch of plastic pieces. Now these are going to be for the missiles, and I suspect that that's partially what the wooden dowels are for. That's just an assumption, but I can make a safe assumption, I think. So we've got the missile tail feathers and nose cones. Okay, then we've got our bungee cord here, a little rubber elastic shock cord. Then we've got a bunch of clay. That is a lot. There's 4 squares of clay in there. So obviously this is going to require a lot of nose weight for balance. We have a parachute. Now this is your older style looking parachute. I'm anxious to see this one. I have not seen one of these older style parachutes in person. And then we should have 2 sheets of each We got this sheeting with the, looks like the wing sets on it, and this other set which might be the air intakes and vertical fins. So we got 2 of each of those. And last but not least, we've got the decal set. Let's go ahead and take a look at the decals. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, I am going to scan these in before I apply them to the model, because it never hurts to have scanned copies if you ever need to make a copy. Oh, beautiful. Those are nice. Now what's interesting, it actually says 2005 on the print, but this actually did not, it was not released to the public until, again, the 2006 catalog. So kind of interesting. So we'll take care of those, keep them safe. All right, so we'll set these aside for the time being. I will clear the board and we will start building the Estes Screaming Eagle. Okay, the first thing we want to do is to put the markings on the body tube. And you're probably looking at that body tube saying, it doesn't look like it did when we inventoried it. And something that I like to do before I really start getting into the build process is I take my tubes outside and I primer them, and then I immediately clean off all the primer with lacquer thinner. And what that does is it leaves behind in the spiral grooves a little trace amount of primer, and that helps fill the spiral grooves ahead of time. Now this is 2 coats. I put 1 coat on, cleaned it all off, let it dry for a little bit, put on another coat and cleaned it all off, and it helps fill in that grooves. So when you come to actually priming and painting the rocket, this should alleviate all of your spiraling from being visible. So just a little trick of the trade, but that's the first thing I do so I can get this out of the way and drying while I get other things going. But now that it's ready to go, we're going to take our marking guide. Now this is cut out from the instructions, but I photocopy the instructions first. I don't like to cut out the originals, so this is a photocopy. And we want to wrap this on, line up our 2 notches like that, and grab a small piece of masking tape to hold them together, and then let's slide it down a little bit. And then I'm also going to take a second piece just to keep it attached to the tube, so that way it can't rotate on the tube at all. And we're going to make some marks. Now this is a little bit different than your typical rocket. This has 2 fins, or in this case wings, and then a launch lug line. So I'm going to make a mark for this wing. I'm going to make a mark for our launch lug, and I will label this LL. And then our other wing, just like that, 3 marks. Okay, so now we can remove all of our tape. Slide this off, and you can use a door frame. I like to use the Estes body marking guide. Let's see, what size do I want to use? Let's use this one. Okay, and then just line up your marks, and we want to go full length on the tube. Line it up and then draw your line. Okay, and then let's get to one of the wings here. And our second wing. Okay, there we have it. So we've got the 3 lines marked on the body tube, and we are set to go. Now we're going to start building the engine mount. Okay, now we're going to assemble the motor mount. Now the instructions have you do it one way, and we're going to do it that way with a slight modification. But I will tell you, I don't necessarily agree with that being the easiest and most efficient. But if you're a skill level 2 builder, then maybe this would be the route to go. I'll explain to that in a second when we get to it. But first thing we need to do is make some marks on our engine mount tube. So go ahead and take a ruler and line it up at 0 at the bottom. And we're going to make 3 marks. 1 at the 1/4 inch line. Okay. 1 at the inch line. and one at the 2.5 inch line. And these are all stemming from this side here. Okay, so we've got our 3 lines marked. Now, in preparation for what we're about to do, which is gluing in the engine thrust ring, I like to take my engine spacer, and they tell you to make a mark at, in this case, 1/4 inch, and then you're going to push that ring down the tube using this. And you're supposed to stop it at that mark. Well, sometimes you miss it, sometimes you don't. So what I like to do is drill a hole and run a toothpick at that 1/4 inch mark. That way when you push it in, it stops you right on that point. There's no going past it. So that's just a little trick I like to do when gluing in the thrust ring. So that's an easy modification you can make to any engine spacer. Okay, so let's go ahead and also make our little slot for our engine hook. Now what they call for is using the 3rd line you drew, which is at the 2.5 inch line, which by the way is also a 1/4 inch from this end, and just take your X-Acto knife, cut a little slit. Use a sharp knife. I can't say for sure that this is a relatively new knife because it's not. It's seen some abuse. So there we go. And you want to wiggle it just a little bit to make room. Just do a quick test fit, make sure the engine hook fits in there nicely. Now one thing I also like to do is let's get the engine hook placed, and I'm going to draw some extension lines because the hook actually covers your original marks up, and then you can't see where you're supposed to glue things down. Okay, so there we go. Okay, now what I want to do is take my engine thrust ring, and let me grab I like to apply glue with a Q-tip. That makes things pretty easy to do. So I'm going to get my spacer ready to go. We're going to run the thrust ring from the aft end of the rocket motor tube up to the front. That way no glue is in the tube itself. We're going to push any glue that may be in there up and out toward the front, clearing the way for the upcoming motors. Let me just go ahead and get this started in there. Let me just run it up just a little bit, like so. I'm going to take some glue and apply it to my Q-tip. Okay, I'm going to run it down below where that engine hook goes. Just run it around. Nice, good coverage. Now we're going to take this and push it until it stops, and then pull it back out. See how easy that was? And it is now perfectly positioned right where you want it. In fact, it's already built up a little bit of a fillet by pushing that glue up forward. So that's how we like to run those. Just a little trick there. Okay, we can dispose of that for the time being. Okay, next thing we want to do is take our engine hook, which we've just been playing with, and let's go ahead and insert it. And we want to make sure we're not hitting the thrust ring. There. Well, let me wiggle this just a little bit to make more room. There we go. We're off by just maybe a hair. Okay. There. Now we're in. Engine hook still, or the thrust ring still looks good. Everything's where it should be. And if you're not sure, you can just do another quick run with your spacer. In and out. Perfect. Okay, now we want to take our engine tube and run a bead of glue on the back side of the middle line that we drew. And just run that bead, because we're going to push the ring onto it from the back, the front side actually. Okay, so our engine block, slide it on, and you twist, and it's going to try to catch on you, so be careful. There, and then go ahead and align your hook before it sets, and then let's draw a fillet with our finger to clean that up. Just like that. And then we're going to take our other ring, and this one we're going to put it just over where the hook goes into the tube. Okay, so we're going to run a bead of glue There. And same thing, we're just going to slide this on until it's at the point we want. Right there. Clean up, making a fillet. Okay. And while we're here, we can go ahead and make some fillets on the other ends as well. They can be drying while this all sets. So we'll get all this laid down. And clean that up with our finger. And very important, as we learned before, make sure you clean any excess glue off the green ring. See how we got glue on the rings? So we're going to clean all that off, because that'll make installing the tube into the body tube a lot more difficult. There, so that's all cleaned up. So we're just going to let this sit and dry, and we will come back to it. Okay, now that the engine tube has had time to dry, you're going to now discover why we had that second 1/4 inch line drawn on the tube. So let's go ahead and do a quick dry fit here to make sure everything lines up and fits. The launch lug line is going to go in line with our engine hook. So you want to make sure that that is in line with that, and it's going to go down right to that depth to the 1/4 inch mark. Okay, so there we go. So we can take this out. Now I like to use Q-tips again. Let's see how far down we need to go from the end of the tube. Yeah, that'll work about right there. So let's go ahead and grab our wood glue. And if you're not comfortable doing this quickly, you might want to use epoxy. That gives you a little bit more working time. But if you've done this before, then you know wood glue works, but it's very finicky, and you really have to work quickly because the cardboard will catch. Okay, let's put one more coat on there, which gives us actually a little bit more lubrication, meaning more working time. Okay, and we'll take our tube, get our engine hook in line with our launch lug. Okay, I'm going to start that. Now the instructions don't call for it. You might want to put a second ring of glue for your back ring, but the instructions don't call for it. I'm not going to worry about it because it's pretty deep in the tube. So let's go ahead and go, and you'll feel it catch. Twist a little bit, line things up, and there we have it. We're right at the 1/4 inch mark. We're in line with the launch lug line. And so now we're just going to let that sit and dry, and it's time to start working on the wing assembly. Okay, next up we're going to work on the wing assembly, and it does call for sanding the wings as they are in the template, and we will do a light sand just to knock off anything major, but we're not going to overdo it because, as you know, and you know me, I'm going to sheet these wings with polystyrene. So that being said, we got them lightly sanded, but nothing too much. But we do need to cut out the 3 pieces of the wing, which is this piece, and that piece. So let me just go ahead and start cutting. And you know what? Actually, I think it'd be a lot quicker if I just use a little bit of magic. So let me just snap my fingers and get them cut out. See, isn't that so much faster? I wish everything in life could be done that way. But I digress. Okay, so next thing we want to do is actually glue these together. I did off camera also sand the nubs off the adjoining pieces where they're going to glue together, just to make those fit a little bit easier for us. Okay, so what we want to do here is take a straight edge ruler, and this is going to be kind of our baseline for attaching these parts together. And you can kind of see a rough fit here, how they all kind of fit together like a puzzle. And I'm going to take some wood glue, and I'm going to take a Q-tip to actually, help spread a little bit. And you also want to have, always have on hand paper towels. And as I reach for them, I bump the camera because I'm just clumsy like that. And there we go. Okay. What we want to do is, as we glue the parts together, we want to press them into the straight edge to get that nice, straight, even edge along the bottom side there. Okay, so I'm going to take the wood glue here. And also what I'm going to do is after I get all these joints butted up together, I'm going to lay them flat under my weight and press them. That'll help keep everything level and flat as the glue actually dries. Okay. And that's going to slide right into that joint there. Okay, I'm going to push everything flat against that straight edge. And we're going to, I'm going to lay this under the weights in my press, and we're going to let that sit for about an hour just to set up and dry completely hard. We'll come right back when it's over. Okay, the wing half is taken out of the press. It's been flattened completely, everything's straight. I did off camera sand down the joints a little bit. I did work on the nubs a little bit that were protruding off the sides. Everything's good to go. And the next thing you would think would be, according to the instructions, would be installing the air intakes. However, I mentioned earlier that I'm going to be sheeting this, so I want to sheet it first. And something I want to try, and you're probably thinking I'm nuts for even attempting this, but you're probably wondering, what is that little strip of polystyrene plastic doing there? Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to sheet the entire perimeter of this piece prior to laying down the main flat piece of plastic. I have done some practice off camera a little bit with this technique, and it's really not as hard as it sounds. Here, I'll just show you one little bit. Let's just take a dab of glue. I'm going to use the Tester's plastic cement, and boy, it just keeps coming out of the tube, doesn't it? Okay. We're going to kind of break it down into segments. I'm going to do this front part here first, and I won't show you the whole thing on camera, just give you an idea of how we do this. So I'm just going to take a little bit of the glue and spread it over this entire portion. And if there's any excess, just use your Q-tip to kind of clean it up a little bit. Okay, then we'll take our piece, which is obviously too long, but I'll trim it. So I'm just going to lay it onto the wood, and by pinching it we can kind of center it, press it into the corner, and it bonds and grabs it pretty quickly. You'll be impressed with how honestly how easy this technique is. Okay, then we'll lay it on its side, and I'm just going to trim with a razor blade. There, just like that. Okay. And the nice thing about it too is once we get all this glued down around, when we sheet the sides, that's going to glue very slightly to the edge, and that's going to help keep these sides in position also. Okay, so we've got that edge down. Let me just sand this a little bit. Let me do this leading edge here, and then I'll call it good for camera work. Just take a little bit. Spread it onto the piece. Take our strip, and I think I trimmed maybe a little less than 1/8 of an inch to get this thickness. Okay. And then just trim it. Just like that. And just keep working your way all the way around the perimeter. It'll do curves very nicely. You can see it did that curve right there pretty easily. Yeah, it'll do all the curves, you know, all the little pieces. Just take your time, enjoy it, have fun, and when we're done, we'll come back and we'll sheet this. And I'm also going to do the same on the other wing, and we'll get them up to speed with one another. Okay, just like we do with the wings, I'm also going to do the air intakes in the same fashion. So I'm just going to do a light sand over the surface, but nothing too extreme. Okay, and we're going to start cutting these out. Now these This balsa actually feels a little bit lighter, so I think it's easier to cut. In fact, yeah, this is super easy to cut. I may not have to use magic to cut these ones out. It just seems a little bit more natural. In fact, we're almost done here with these. Yeah, see, they just sort of fall out. Oh, there we go. Okay, we can discard these little guys here. And we've got the centerpiece here. That might be it. Yep, there we go. Okay, they do call for cutting out the horizontal or the vertical fin as well, but I don't think we're quite ready to attach it yet, as we still got to do some sheeting on some stuff and some prep work. But they call for cutting it out, so we'll cut it out. You know what, since we're here, let's just go ahead and cut this little guy out. I believe this is one of our missile holders that we'll get to down the road here. There we go. Okay, so we finished up with that sheet. And since we're doing that, let's go ahead and cut out from the wing pieces the other missile mount brackets. Let's see, I think this one goes this way. There we go. Okay, so now we're done, completely done with all the balsa templates. I'm going to set these three pieces aside, as we'll get to them in a future assembly, and probably do the same with the vertical fin. But we can go ahead and let's do a dry fit on this first. We want to let's take the end with the short end here, and it's going to go to what we would call the rear. So it would plug in like this. Oh, nice fit. Perfect fit. Okay, I'm going to go retrieve one of the wing halves, and we're going to use the wing as to assist us in aligning these as well. So we'll get right back to this. Okay, I want to show off real quick what the lining looks like around the perimeter of the rocket. I should say the wing section of the rocket. Again, real easy, real quick. After I got it all laid down, it dried relatively quickly. Then I was just able to take my flat hand sander and sand it flush to the sides. So it's smooth, it's darn near perfect. So, but I'm going to use this as my guide to create my air intakes. What I mean by that is I'm going to go ahead and dry fit the air intake into this section here. Like I said, just do a dry fit. There we go. And we'll take the, well, it's the bottom side, it's inverted, but we're going to take this bottom piece here, lay it into position, and what this will do is this will keep everything in alignment for me as I glue it. I'm going to do some quick dabs of thin CA glue at the junction points, and then I'll remove it from the wing and then run a bead of glue down each joint. So let me just go ahead and do this real quick. Let that wick in. Okay. I'm going to let these two set up. Now this back one's a little tricky because I'll show you later. It has a curve to it. You have to press this part down into position. So let me go ahead and hold that down while I apply my glue. Give it a second to grab. Let me just hit it real quick with some kicker. And, oh, see, it's popped out. I didn't hold it down long enough. Okay, I think it's holding now. Okay, now we can remove the whole piece from the wing like that, and there we go. Perfect alignment. Hopefully you can see that. And now what I'll do is I'm just going to drop a glue down that seam and just let it run the full length. Okay, and we'll do this side. And CA glue is really good at just wicking into all the little nooks and crannies in there. Okay, everything looks really good. Okay, I'm going to clear the bench and I'm going to get out some plastic sheeting, and our next step is actually going to be sheeting the 2 wing panels. And I should be able to get 2 of them done at a time. So let me get the plastic out and we'll start cutting. Okay, the first step I want to do is I want to make sure that I've got enough plastic here to do the entire wings, both top and bottom on both. And based on the shape of the fins or the wings, if I were to put these, say, out here on this edge and this one here on this edge, I should be able to do the other wings on the center portion here. So just to confirm this though, I want to get a traced line. I'm going to give just maybe a 1/16 of an inch overlap space there, and I want to trace this. Just, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect or exact, but just, you know, a good trace of the fin. Okay, and let's do the other one here. Okay, so that being there like that, now let's see if I can't fit a complete set on the inside. Looks like it's going to work. Okay, let me trace this out. That way I'll have a good idea of where I'm going to have to cut. Okay, so there we have it. We can fit all 4 wing panels onto one sheet of plastic. That's awesome. Okay, so now let me take my scissors and do some rough cuts here. Okay, first off, I know we can run a cut right down the middle. You know what I'm thinking? Actually, I probably would be able to get away with doing one set here at a time. That way I can place them in the press and weigh them down together like that. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so let me go ahead and get some epoxy and we'll start mixing it up and we'll lay it down. Okay, as you can see, I've got the plastic laid down. Now I do have it on wax paper because this is going to get messy. In fact, I've got a glove on because I just know I'm going to get epoxy everywhere. But I've got the plastic taped down to the wax paper. The wax paper is taped down to the bench. So I'm going to actually apply the epoxy to the plastic because I'm afraid if I apply it to the wood itself, the epoxy is going to seep through those slots there, fill them in, make a mess. So I'm actually going to apply the epoxy to the plastic, thin it out as best I can, and then lay these down on the plastic. So let me go ahead and mix up. I got some 5-minute epoxy. So once it starts mixing here, I'm going to have to go pretty quick. But I think well, I sure hope I've mixed up enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour down as much as I can in the area of the wing. And then just start spreading it as thin as I can. And this is why I'm using wax paper, because you're obviously going to have to drag it off the surface to get it thin. Okay, just draw that as thin as I can make it. Okay, now we'll take one wing, drop it in position, and we'll take our other wing and drop it in position. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of alcohol and wipe off some of the epoxy that I see got onto the wood, just so it's clean for our next surface glue. Okay, so now I'm going to take this off the bench. I'm going to lay it on the press and get some weight on this and get that clamped down nice and tight. And we'll come back right when it's time to cut it out. Okay, actually a lot's been done since the last segment. I know I said we'd come back and do the cutouts, but I went ahead and did that off camera. It just seemed like the thing to do. But in addition to actually cutting it out, I did also cut out the little insert notches that the intake is going to snap into. And you'll notice on the other side it's nice and clean. That's the nice thing about this plastic, is I was able to cut, parts out and it's still clean and flat on the other side. The easiest way to do this though is to hold this up to a light from behind, and you'll be able to see the windows, so to speak, very clearly. And then you just take your knife and gently cut those out. We're going to simply glue this with wood glue and clamps initially, and then I will run a bead of CA, thin CA, down each joint and just let it run down to get full coverage. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to take some wood glue first and a toothpick. And I'm just going to fill in each little slot with some wood glue. Okay. And then we'll just take our toothpick and kind of run it around, make sure we get all the sides coated. Okay. And I'll also just get a paper towel and help wipe some of that off. Now we're going to get some seepage out once it presses in anyway, but we can go ahead and clean up a little bit as we can. Okay, so now it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to line these up in the slots, and they pretty much pop into place. assuming you built everything straight and accurate. Okay. Okay, we do have a little bit of seepage, which is expected, but I can take my clamps now and let's see, that's the best way to do this. Okay. And we can go ahead and take a Q-tip and clean off that residual glue that seeps out. Okay, hit the other side too. Okay, now because I've got 3 clamps and it's really hard to clamp this corner piece here, I am going to start with my CA glue now to help hold that down. And see how it's kind of sitting at an angle this way, downward. So the glue is going to naturally flow along the seam. So let me just put a couple drops in. Let it run. And I'm just going to pinch that. Just hold it for a second. Okay, we'll give it a quick shot of accelerator there to help speed things along. Okay, and we'll do the other side. Okay, I'm going to gently, maneuver this, and I'll put a few drops in from the back side as well. And just let gravity kind of do its thing. Okay, very nice. So we're just going to let that sit and dry. And we can actually, when we come back, we can go ahead and glue in our vertical stabilizer, which I've got pre-cut. So that'll be the next thing. Okay, now that the air intake has dried, and you can see the other side, I've already completed it off camera. Same process, no difference. The only thing is I have already glued on the vertical stabilizer. So now we're just going to replicate that on this fin here. So I'm going to do the same thing with these slots here. I'm going to use just a drop of wood glue. Right inside there. And then I'll take a toothpick and just kind of smear it around. Okay, but really the big difference is I'm going to actually include 2 different types of adhesives on this process. I'm actually going to glue the underside of the fin to the plastic in the middle with plastic cement, because the plastic cement does turn the plastic into a pretty good bonding agent. And that's also how I applied the, if you remember, the plastic sheeting on the edges of the fins. So let me just go ahead and take my same Q-tip And I'm going to run a little bit down the seam. There. That'll help that. And we just simply slide these notches into the position here. Just like that. Okay, and you can see we did get some wood glue coming out. So that's easy to clean up. Just grab a Q-tip. If I can find my Q-tips. There they are. And we'll just wipe that off. Just like that. You want to visually check it, make sure it's vertical and perpendicular to the horizontal fin. But yeah, now the hardest part is just we're gonna let this sit and dry, and that's the hardest part of modeling. We'll come back and we're actually gonna attach these now to the main body tube. So that's really gonna be when it starts looking like a rocket. Okay, now we're going to actually glue the jet part of the rocket to the body tube. I am going to use the lines that they give us as a reference. However, I should mention you definitely want to scuff up a little bit where we're going to make the adhesion with the glue. And I am going to slightly differ from the instructions, and some of you will laugh saying I always do, but the chances of sanding, as the instructions call for, a perfect 45-degree angle into this piece here, maybe not 45, but the right angle to match the body tube, that's pretty slim. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue it straight as is, and then fill that whole gap in right here with epoxy. And that should give us plenty strong bond. Plus I'll run a bead of CA glue down the inside channel so it'll bond the side to the tube as well, the full length. So in order to get it in position though, I'm gonna eyeball it from behind, and we want to get the launch lug parallel with, call it the vertical fin, or perpendicular to the horizontal fin. And once we get it right where we want it, I'm going to drop just a dab of medium CA glue just to hold it in position until we can get the epoxy. So, and I want to put a drop in the rear and up in the front. So let me go ahead and line it up. Okay. I'm just going to drop one small drop of medium right into there. Let gravity kind of help it flow downward. And a quick shot of accelerator. And I'm going to do the same thing up in the front. And let's just wipe off any extra. A little squirt of accelerator. Again, this is just like a tack hold to hold it long enough till we can pour our epoxy in. Okay, so there we have it. See, now it's holding on its own just fine. Okay, so I will do the other side, and then we'll come in with some epoxy and fill in that crevice right there. Okay, as you can see, I've got both wing panels on. It looks really sharp. But I do want to run a bead of thin CA down each of these seams on the bottom side. And I'm going to use gravity to help let it flow. I'm just going to drop a few drops right up in this gap here, and I'm just going to let it flow down. And if it drips off the back, that's fine. I got a piece of wax paper here to catch it. So let's just go ahead and take some thin CA glue. and just let it flow down. And you can kind of pinch it to help hold it. And we can do the other side. Okay, I don't see any dripping out, so looks like, well, we might get a little bit. Yeah, just a little bit came out. Wipe off any excess with the Q-tip. Okay. Now in this case, I don't want to spray Kicker because it could possibly bubble up, and there's really no way we can get good sanding down in there to clean that up. So I'm just going to let it dry naturally. I'm going to go fix up some epoxy, and we'll come back and we're going to fill in that joint right along that seam line there on both sides. Looking good. Looks like a real jet now, doesn't it? Okay, what I've decided to do next is to fill in the gap. If you remember, instead of sanding a 45-degree or so angle into the wings to be a little more flush to the tube, we just CA glued it in the fore and the aft section just to hold it in position. But now I'm going to run a thin bead of wood glue down that gap. You might be able to see I've already run one bead, that's why it's a little bit shiny. But as you know, wood glue tends to evaporate and shrink a little bit, so I wanted to add a second layer into that groove. And then when that's settled and dried, then I'm going to go back in with some filler, fill that in, make some nice smooth contour sanding to it, and just make it, you know, nice and contoured. But I do want to get another layer of glue in there. And I wrapped a strip of masking tape so I don't make quite a mess when I spread this with my finger. See all that overflow? That would be on the wing, and it'd be a lot more difficult to clean it. Okay. And we'll do this side. Okay, didn't quite put as much on that side as I did the first side. Okay, now we're just going to peel the tape off. See, now there's no cleanup. That's the nice part about doing it this way. And then, like I said, once this is dry and cured, we're going to go back in and fill that in with some putty and sand it smooth. And we need to actually start working on the missile attachments. So maybe we'll do that next, but anyway, we're going to let this sit and dry for a little bit first. Okay, now we're going to assemble the missile racks, and there are two of these, but I'm only going to do one on camera for demonstration. Now what I'm going to attempt to do here is, they say glue one side in and you know, hold it, and then you try to balance this and then fit this piece in. I'm going to attempt to slide this first one on past where it goes, and then glue these two together first. Then I can sand the seam if need be, and then slide this over the joint, if that makes any sense. So we'll see if this works, but let me put a little bit of super glue on this side. Okay, it doesn't take much. Then I'll just align these and press them together. Oops. And CA glue does dry rather quickly, so you don't have a whole lot of working time. Okay, let's see. It might take a little bit of sanding. Let me just smooth it out just a little bit. Okay, now let's see if this will slide in over top of it. It does. Now what I can do here is center it, and then I'll actually use a thin CA, which will seep in and wick into the wood grain. So it is vitally important that you get this completely straight and as perfect as you can, because once that thin sits in there, you're pretty much done. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little drop of CA on each side. And one on this side. Okay, had a little drop go crazy on me there. Wipe that off. Okay, so yeah, that works. Okay, so this is the one missile rack. I'll do the other one the same way, and then we can actually start working on the missiles as well. Okay, next we're going to build the missiles, and as you can see, I've already made one, just a little practice piece, and it was so easy. I'll show you how to make one, and I'll just do the other 4 off camera, but there's a total of 6, and like very, very, very easy to build. So what I do is I take, they say use a miter saw and a miter box. I don't have one, but I easily cut it with a straight edge razor. So if you just line it up on a line and cut it at the 2-inch mark and just roll it, kind of like you're cutting a launch lug actually. Just rotate it and press, and then it snaps right off. So there's your 2-inch piece. And they recommend using plastic cement, which is fine. The way I like to use plastic cement to keep it clean is to first just make a little puddle and use a toothpick. That way you can control how much you're putting on. And then just put a little dab on one end of the stick. And then slide the tail feathers on and press it back into the plastic. Just like that. And then we'll do the same for the nose. Once we get it on, the only thing you really need to worry about is getting the fins to align with each other. And you can just do that from looking overhead. As you can see there, it's a little bit off. So we'll just gently rotate it before the glue sets up and get them in alignment with each other, just like that. And voila, another missile done. So I'll do the other 4 off camera, but same process, and then we should be ready to start attaching things to the main frame. Okay, we've got the model all framed up basically with all the fins and stabilizers. One thing I did do off camera was I did fill in this gap here with glue initially to help strengthen it, and then I went over the seam a little bit with some Bondo and helped sand it to make a nice contoured smooth surface. It'll take a little bit more touching up, but once we get it primed, then we'll be able to see more of the imperfections and we can clean those up. But for now, before we do prime it, we do need to make some fillets. Now, the fillets that we're going to put on are not necessarily for strength, because there's a lot of strength in the tabs that it glued into. And besides, we're gluing onto plastic. So the wood glue is basically just to fill any gaps and to help contour the gap, basically the seam. So I'm just going to run just a thin bead of wood glue down this seam here, and just use my little pinky finger and help draw that down. Okay, a couple little gaps, we can fill that in. Okay, clean up that little extra debris. And we'll work on this side. One of the most underrated tools on any workbench has got to be the paper towel. It is a mandatory piece of equipment. Always have paper towels on the ready. Sometimes you can predict their use and sometimes it becomes an emergency use. But nonetheless, always have paper towels at the ready. Okay, now I'll flip it over and we're just going to do a long seam down the fuselage and the wing. It's best to clean up any overrun while it's still tacky or wet, as opposed to it drying and then you have to sand that down. Okay. One more. It's not the cleanest operation, but it's effective. Okay, looking good. Okay, we're just going to let this sit and dry, and then we'll be ready for primer. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to prepare the tips of the vertical stabilizer using these 3/4 inch wooden dowels. And they recommend, they say it's optional, but they say you can round the leading edge of the tips. And in the face card picture, it shows them rounded. So I obviously want to match that. You could sit here and try to sand it. What I found easiest to do is to take a chucked drill and very loosely chuck the dowel. But you don't want to it too tight because you don't want to put the impression of the chuck into the wood, but just tight enough where it's not going to go anywhere. And then just get a piece of sandpaper and just run the drill and sand the tip and get a rounded edge to it. You'll see how this goes here. Okay, we're getting there. I don't know if it's focusing or not, but it is definitely rounding. There. That's pretty good. We'll unchuck it. And not sure if you can see the difference between, well, here, let me show you the other one next to it. Yeah, that's substantially better. You can see that. And that was minimal work. Very, very easy to do. So we'll just do the second one in the same fashion. Okay. There we have it. Two pretty darn near perfectly rounded tips. So there you go. That's as easy as that. So now we can attach them to the vertical fin. Okay, although I do have the vertical stab tips done and ready to glue on, I do want to finish the bottom side up first. That way I think it'll be easier to install these when the bottom's done, because when you set it this way, a good chance you're going to knock them off. So we're going to start off with some rather simple things. We are going to do the missile racks first. We're going to attach them to the underside of each wing. And it's a straightforward process of just inserting some wood glue into these slots. Okay, and I'm going to take a toothpick and just kind of work that glue around inside. Okay, we'll take one of them here, and I've already dry fitted these. They do fit nicely, so no issues there. Just going to drop those tabs right into the slots. Just like that. And there you can see it attached. Make sure it's perpendicular to the wing. There it is. Okay, that's one, and now we'll do the other side. I'll tell you, I am not going to glue the missiles on until after the rocket's complete and the painting's complete, because I find it impossible to get those missiles painted if they're already attached to the rack. So that's just one little thing I'm going to do different. Okay, a little bit of seepage. We can clean it up with a Q-tip. Maybe a little bit on this side too. Okay, so that wraps those up. Now we can also go ahead and take care of the launch lug as well. And what they tell you to do is, using the center line of this body tube here, measure 5.5 inches from the base. So I already did that off camera, and I made a little line right there. So now what I'm going to do is I scuffed up the tube with sandpaper. Now I'm just going to scuff up the lug a little bit. Okay. And run a very fine bead of glue, because we'll rivet this later. Okay, we're going to set it in position. Okay, we're going to eyeball it from behind. Make sure it's parallel to that line that's drawn on the tube. You have a few moments to tweak things just a little bit before the glue sets. Okay, that looks good. I don't know if you can see it from behind. But it is dead centered on that center line. So we're just going to leave this alone for a few moments. Let that set up, because I definitely don't want to install the tips with this still soft, because it'll fall off. So let's just let this sit for a few moments. When it's hardened, we'll come back and we'll glue the stab tips on the vertical stabilizer. Okay, while we're waiting for the launch lug to dry, I thought I'd take the opportunity to go ahead and do the nose cone. I was a little shocked, I'll be honest with you, when I discovered that you have to install 4 squares of clay into this nose cone. I think each one of these is a 1/4 ounce, so that makes this a full ounce of nose weight. Wow. But I did some reading of the reviews on the internet, and and everything on the internet is true, obviously, duh. And people are saying that, yeah, you better add it all to get the stability right. Now, you're not going to break any altitude records with this much weight, but I'm not after altitude records. I just want a good, stable flying rocket. So I'm going to install all 4 squares. This is like cutting pieces of butter. Okay. And the hole in the nose cone for these to go in is very narrow, so I'm gonna have to make some tight little snakes here. Okay, and I've got a little bamboo skewer here just to help drive them in. Let's do maybe half a square at a time. Just roll these up. Okay, let's see if that's enough. Nope. Well, I just can't still get over how much weight we got to put in this thing. You know what? This snake's getting awfully long. We're gonna have to do it in quarters, I think. Okay. Okay, I'll do 1 square and then I'll do the rest off camera. It's gonna get monotonous here, but there we go. I'll bet that all this clay is going to take up about half of that nose cone, if not more than half. There, I'll just do this all at once. This is a full day project, just putting the nose weight in. That's a lot of clay. Okay. Okay. All right, well, I'll work on the other 3 squares off camera. We'll come back, and hopefully by then the launch lug will be dry, and I can then glue the stab tips on. We'll be right back. Okay, the next thing we want to do before we start painting is to glue the tips on the vertical stabilizers. They're the wooden dowels that we cleaned up earlier, and they're just going to glue right on the top of the fins there, flush with the rear end, so the front's going to be sticking out just a little bit. You can see there. I'm going to use plastic cement for one main reason. Plastic cement is decent on wood, but really good on plastic. And since I plasticized, or whatever you want, however you want to term it, the fins, I want to use the plastic cement on them, and then the wood should easily attach to it. Instead of just making a glob mess on the fins itself, I'm just going to make a little puddle, or a big puddle, however you want to define this, and use a toothpick, and we're just going to very lightly put some on the vertical fins, because I don't want too much to squeeze out and make a mess. Try to keep this nice and clean. And we'll put a little bit on this side as well. Okay, now we can take our tips and just lay them right in position. All right, that's one. And obviously you want to make sure that the rounded leading edge is facing forward. Okay, so there we have it. They look really good. This is going to look phenomenal once we get it primed and painted. I will tell you, there's a couple spots, like for example right here in the filler, that I know it's going to stand out as, as a pit once we primer it. But I'm not going to fill that just yet, because I see some other spots, and I want to prime the whole thing so I can identify all the problem areas, and then we'll go back in and fill in. So really nothing more to do than just sit and let these dry, which means being patient and waiting, which again, hardest part of modeling. So we're just gonna let this sit, and then I'll probably prime it off camera, and we'll come back when all the priming is done and we'll go from there. Okay, as you can see, the rocket has really changed in appearance. I do want to point out a couple things before I begin the decals, and the decals are ready to go. I'm not going to record them because they're just too tedious and finicky. It'll drive you nuts watching me put these on. So I'll do these off camera, but in preparation for the decals, and not only painting the rocket in primer gray, this is all it is primer, but it's the perfect color, so I just left it as is. But let me show you the face card just to kind of explain why I did what I did. So the face card shows where the red decals go, and then down the center hull of the rocket, or the jet, it's orange, it's not red. So those are actually two different colors. So I did paint the center of the rocket orange from that point down, and then I was about to mask off and work on the white and the darker gray color panels, and I thought, you know what, why mask and paint when you can just print up a decal? So I printed up on white decal paper some gray stripes. It's just a little bit different shade of gray than the primer, and then I just basically left this as the plain white sheet that the decal paper is made of, and then this is the gray print. I did that for both the wings and the horizontal stabilizers. So up to this point, everything is now pretty much ready for decals. The missiles, I do have them drying. I painted them all white, solid white, including the center dowels. When they dry, I'll detail them up a little bit with some yellow paint, because you can see in the image here, they do have little yellow tips on them. I'll do that prior to gluing them onto the racks. But anyway, I just want to show you where we're at prior to decaling. I'm going to go do that now, and then I will do a final closeout with the completed rocket at the end. Although there's a few things left to do, we still have to install the shock cord mount, attach it to the nose cone as well. So we'll do that after I get the decal work done. Okay, now we're going to make the shock cord mount, and what I like to do personally is just make a photocopy of the page so I don't have to cut up the original. And this paper works just fine as well. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out the mount. Okay. Tell you what, I'm going to use this to keep the workbench from getting all messy. So let me do some pre-folds here on the paper. Okay, I like to invert it and get my rubber shock cord ready to go. Use my wood glue. And this is where it gets a little messy. So I'm going to put some on 2 and 1. And we're just going to spread that off onto the extra paper there. And we'll go ahead and hit 3 as well, since I got to lay it across there on the bottom. Okay, so we're going to lay this across 3 and onto 2. At a little bit of an angle. Okay, then we'll fold 1 over 2. And let me put a little bit on top of 1. And fold that over onto 3. And then, if you know me, I like to take this over to my press and put it under weight to get it as flat as humanly possible. That way it takes up the least amount of space inside the body tube. So now that that's done, I'm going to go weigh this down, and we'll come back when it's dry and we'll glue it into the body tube. Okay, now here's something I want to share with you. If you ever build a rocket that you know is going to require, or at least you may want to try, a Quest Q-Jet motor, which is 18 millimeter. Some modifications may be in order. You'll notice if you took an Estes 18 millimeter motor and a Quest 18 millimeter motor, they're the same diameter. That's right, they're 18 millimeter. However, the length is not the same. The motor itself is the same, but the ejection nozzle on the Quest motor extends further out, and this goes up into the rocket. Well, now if you build any model rocket from Estes that uses an engine hook, well, guess what? That hook very likely is going to inhibit this from going any further. For example, if you take this Q-Jet, which by the way is a really cool looking motor going into the orange and black rocket. I just think that's a cool effect. But we hit, and we don't quite reach the clip to go all the way. And now, in some cases, if the little lug back in here on the engine hook is short, you can rotate the motor until one of the flat spots on that hex will fit. See if it'll focus on the hex there. See, it's hexagonal. One of those flat spots could possibly fit if that hook has a short tab. However, in the case of the Screaming Eagle, it's not short, it's a long one. So what do? Now, the reason I ran into this dilemma was because this rocket, per the face card, actually calls for A motors, B motors, all the way up to a C motor. Well, that's not possible with this one, and it's my own doing, but this rocket is over 100 grams as it sits right now. It's actually 109 grams, and that's without the parachute, that's without the motor, and that's without our missiles attached. Now, that's going to put us, upwards of 115 dry weight, and then you add another 20 grams for the motor or so. There's no way you're going to get it off the ground with an A, B, or even a C6 motor, because this only will lift 113 grams. So I thought, well, my next choice would be to jump up to a D composite, which is Quest. Now, I do still have the option of running a C5 motor, which has the doubled liftoff weight, which is a little over 220 grams, which would suffice. But a C6 motor ain't gonna cut it. And I would eventually love to fly this on a D, but I can't get it in. So the question I asked myself is, how am I gonna get that tab short enough for this to fit? Now, I could modify the motor. I could sand these down, or file them, or scrape them with a knife to get one side a little bit lower in so it would fit on that tab. But I don't want to have to do that for every motor that I decide to fly this with. So what's the next option? Well, for me, I have a Dremel that's got this extension, which I can use a little file at the end and run this up the tube and file that down using this. Now, this is going to be tricky, and this is the decision I've gone with, but if you could locate a long round file as well and use it as a bit in a regular Dremel, or even a drill, if that's all you got, you could run that round file up to it. But in this case, I'm going to give it a go with my Dremel. I've already pre-measured. It looks like, I'll show you, it'll hit that tab right there. You can hear it clunking just before this last ring on the handle. So I'm going to insert it that far and then start grinding on that metal tab a little bit, and I'll do a little bit at a time until we get it so it'll fit. So let's go ahead and give that a go. Okay, let's see if we made any progress. Oh, look at that. Took a little twisting because I think I was on one of the points, but now it fits. Voila, problem solved. So now I can fly this on a Quest composite D motor. And you gotta admit, if I can get back out. Okay, why is it stuck? There we go. Okay, that was a little tricky. It worked, and I'm not sure if the camera can even pick it up in there. I don't think there's enough light to see. Yeah, you can barely see the tab, but it is a little shorter than it was. I might attack it a little bit more just to make it a little bit easier, but that is the solution. Again, if I have to, or if you have to, you can always use a round file and just stick it in and work on that metal tab. Or had I known this ahead of time, I would have cut that tab down before I ever installed it into the motor tube. But hindsight's always 20/20. But that's the solution. I'm working on this while I'm still waiting for the shock cord mount to dry. So let me clean this up a little bit more. I'm going to take a little bit more off that tab, and then we'll come back and install the shock cord mount. Okay, we got the shock cord mount ready to go, and I figured I'll take this opportunity just to show you real quick how well we got the motor resolved. So the C motors, they fit nice and, like they're supposed to. There's a little bit of play, but that's the distance that they build into the hook. However, now when you insert a Quest D, see how much easier that goes in? Even rotates a little bit. So much easier to install. Now that I got that taken down, just a little bit more on the tab. So motor problem resolved. So let me go ahead and remove the nose cone. Okay. One thing we can do too is let's go ahead and cut out this center piece for the eyelet. Be very careful not to cut the eyelet through, because then you'll never be able to attach, well, really anything. So I'm going to cut away from the corner. There we go. There we go. Okay, because we're going to tie that to the shock cord here momentarily. Okay, so let me get some wood glue. Now the instructions call for gluing the trifold mount at least 1 inch down to make enough clearance for this shoulder, but I'm gonna go down probably further, pretty much as far as my finger will allow. So let me go ahead and put some wood glue on the mount. Spread it nice and even. Okay, get a paper towel. Okay. Okay, that's about as far as I think I could. I'd say it's about right here, which is about maybe 2 inches down. I'm going to press from the outside of the tube, which will press the mount up as tight as I can get it. And there it is. Flat as a pancake up against the tube. That way there's no obstruction for the parachute and all the wadding and everything to come up and out. That's what we want to prevent from ever happening. Okay, now we can take our nose cone and we can tie a double knot. Whoop. No, that wasn't good. That might be an issue with the I'll tell you. Let me see if I can snap it again. Yes. Okay. Before this dries, I got to get this mount out of here. I'm glad we found that out. Okay. There. Okay. This shock cord is no good. Or as they say down south, no bueno. Yeah, that's not going to survive. So I'm going to make up a new shock cord mount. You know what? This is a good opportunity to go ahead and modify it and upgrade to Kevlar. So lesson learned. I'm going to create, let me print up a new trifold mount and we'll get some Kevlar and we'll do it upright. Okay, so we're going to try this again. Now I've got some 100-pound Kevlar and I've already gone ahead and tied a loop, and I'll explain what I'm going to do here. We're going to do what's called a hybrid. We're going to use Kevlar and a rubber shock cord mount. New rubber, not the old stuff that was in the kit. So you want to make a loop in one end of your Kevlar that the rubber is going to tie onto. The other end is what we're going to attach to the mount. So let me go ahead and get this glued in, and we'll do the same technique as we did before. Just kind of spread this out. I am going to make one exception. I'm going to tie a knot, if I can get this to loop through here, as close to the end as possible. Right there. And let me trim a little bit off. That's going to be more or less a little nub that's going to grab the trifold a little bit more so than a flat piece would. This will possibly help it from ever pulling out. So now let me press that down. Squeeze any excess glue out, and we'll add some glue to the top of one. And we'll go ahead and fold that over onto 3. Okay, so same as before, I'm going to take this over to the press and clamp it between 2 flat plates with a lot of weight, and we'll come back and install it in the body tube once that's done. Okay, I did one major thing off camera, and you can probably see it hiding underneath the wings there, but we've got the missiles mounted. Also, you can tell just the very tips of the nose cone on the missiles. I did paint them yellow with just some plain acrylic cheap paint from the store, but just to give it that little extra scale look as shown in the face card. So really the only structural thing we need to do now is install the shock cord mount, which is completely dry and flat as a pancake. I mean, you can see that. Look how thin that is. So that's what laying it under the press will do to it. So let's go ahead and remove the nose cone. And as you can see, and I'd say I made that about 8 inches long. So we've got 8 inches of Kevlar, and then I've got some brand new rubber here from another Estes kit, and it's about twice as long actually as the original. So we've got stronger Kevlar, we've got twice the length of the elastic. I think this is going to be an improvement. So again, like I mentioned earlier, it was a blessing in disguise that we discovered that it was broken, because now we're going to do it right and better. Okay, so before we attach the rubber shock cord, let's go ahead and mount the paper one, and we'll do it similar to the way we did last time. we'll just spread some glue on the bottom of the paper. Okay. Wipe all glue off your fingers so you don't transfer it to the side of the rocket. Okay, I'll try this again. This is second time doing this, so push it in and we'll press it down into the side. Make sure we're deep enough, yeah. Okay, so that won't take long to set up and harden because it's a very thin layer. So we can actually go ahead and take our shock cord and finish it off on this end. Because I made a loop here in the Kevlar, we're going to feed our rubber through the loop and tie that off. So at any time in the future, if this ever gets old and brittle, which it will over time, we can just simply cut off the old rubber and reattach a new one to the loop in the Kevlar, which theoretically will never go bad on us. I'm not saying I've never seen Kevlar fail, but it's less likely than the rubber, which will deteriorate. Okay, so I think this is where I had trouble on the last rubber elastic, pulling this second knot tight, but we'll cinch that down. Okay, take some scissors, just snip a little bit of a tail off there. And we'll take our wood glue and we're just going to put a little dab there in the knot to keep it from ever wanting to come undone. Okay. Then on the other end, I've already got a snap swivel attached, and I've already got the knot glued a little bit as well. So we can open this up, take our nose cone, latch that onto the nose cone, close it up, and let's go ahead and stuff everything in and we'll do our final closeout. But this is the end of the build. This was a long one. I will admit this was a long, tedious, arduous adventure in building. A good test of patience, good test of skills, and we tried some new things. For example, sheeting the entire wings and tail with plastic. That was a fun little challenge. But there we go. So we got everything in there. We'll close it up. We'll line up our stripes on the nose cone, and the rocket is complete. Now I'm going to give the decals a few more days to cure, and more than likely I'll hit this with some clear coat paint just to help seal the decals in. So before I do fly it, I would like to do some sort of treatment to it. So when you see this on the launch pad, which you will shortly, it probably will have a little bit more gloss to it than you're seeing right now. But I couldn't be more pleased. Let me bring the face card back in so you can do a side-by-side as to what it was supposed to look like. And I think we did a pretty darn good job on mimicking the look. So I'm going to call this one a wrap. Thanks everybody for watching. I've got plenty more rockets in the queue for build videos, so stay tuned. A lot more coming. And hopefully I'll be able to crank them out a lot more regularly than I've been able to the last couple months. But until the next video, everybody, thanks for watching again. God bless, and we will see you in the next video.